The floorboards in the hallway only creaked if you stepped directly in the center. At 2:14 a.m., I heard that exact sound. I froze in the dark, listening to the heavy, uneven breathing just outside my bedroom door. It wasn't my wife. Sarah was fast asleep next to me, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The breathing in the hall was ragged, desperate. I slipped out from under the heavy quilt, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood. I reached for the brass doorknob, my pulse hammering in my throat. I fully expected to find a burglar. I never expected to find my 16-year-old stepson, leaning against the wall, trembling in the dark. 3 years earlier, when Sarah and I got married, everyone warned me about the teenage years. They said blending a family was like walking through a minefield blindfolded. But Leo made it look easy. He was a quiet, polite kid. He kept his room clean, did his homework without being asked, and always said please and thank you. To the outside world, we were the perfect picture of a second chance. Sarah's first marriage had been a disaster. Her ex-husband, Mark, was a ghost of a man. He drifted in and out of their lives, leaving nothing but broken promises and empty bank accounts in his wake. When I stepped into the picture, I wanted to be the anchor they never had. I worked long hours at the firm. I paid off Sarah's debts. I bought us a house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. I thought providing stability was enough. I thought if I just kept the roof over our heads and the fridge full, the past would slowly erase itself. Leo and I weren't incredibly close, but we had a peaceful coexistence. We bonded over silent car rides to baseball practice and the occasional weekend grilling in the backyard. He never called me dad, and I never pushed him to. I was just happy to be the reliable guy in the background, the guy who never let them down. Sarah was glowing again. The heavy bags under her eyes disappeared. She finally felt safe. Protecting that safety became my entire world. I would have done anything to keep the chaos out of our home. I didn't realize the chaos was already living inside it. The shift didn't happen overnight. It bled into our lives like a slow water leak behind a wall, invisible until the rot set in. It started at the dinner table. Leo stopped looking me in the eye. He would push his food around his plate, his shoulders hunched, completely checked out. When Sarah asked about his day, he offered single-word answers. Fine. Okay. Nothing. I chalked it up to teenage moods. I told Sarah to give him space. But then the physical changes started. He was losing weight. His clothes hung off his frame, and dark, bruised-looking circles appeared under his eyes. He looked chronically exhausted. One Tuesday evening, I walked into the kitchen and caught him staring blankly at the open refrigerator. He didn't even notice I was there. "Are you feeling all right, buddy?" I asked, keeping my voice light. He flinched. His whole body jolted like he had been struck. He slammed the fridge door shut and muttered that he was just tired before practically sprinting up the stairs. That reaction gnawed at me. It wasn't just fatigue. It was panic. 2 days later, my suspicion found a target. I kept a leather money clip on the dresser. I always kept exactly $200 in 20s for emergencies. I went to grab cash for the landscaper, and the clip felt light. $60 was missing. I didn't want to believe it. I counted the bills 3 times. I tore the bedroom apart, thinking I had dropped them. But I knew exactly where they went. I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to worry Sarah without proof. Instead, I started watching Leo closely. I noticed how he guarded his backpack. I noticed the way his phone buzzed constantly at dinner and how he would flip it face down with a trembling hand. The quiet, polite kid was hiding something. And the more I watched, the uglier the picture in my head became. I convinced myself it was drugs. It was the only thing that explained the weight loss, the paranoia, and the missing cash. I decided I needed to handle it myself. I had to protect my wife from the truth. The house turned into a silent battleground. Every time Leo walked into a room, my muscles coiled with tension. More things started disappearing. A silver watch I rarely wore. A power drill from the garage. A gift card Sarah had left on the kitchen island. Every missing item felt like a personal betrayal. I was working myself to the bone to provide for this kid, and he was robbing us blind. My resentment started bleeding into my marriage. Sarah noticed my short temper. She asked why I was being so cold to him. "He's just going through a phase," she told me one night in bed, her voice laced with worry. "He needs patience right now." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. I wanted to scream that her perfect son was a thief. But I needed undeniable proof. The snooping started on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Leo was at school, and Sarah was at the grocery store. I stood outside his bedroom door, my stomach twisting with guilt. Crossing that threshold felt like breaking a sacred rule. But the fear of what he was bringing into our home pushed me forward. I turned the knob and walked in. The room smelled stale. I started with his desk, sifting through loose papers and old homework. Nothing. I moved to his closet, digging through the pockets of his winter coats. My hands were shaking. I felt like a criminal in my own house. Then I checked under his mattress. My fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled it out. It was a small, locked cash box. I didn't have the key, but the weight of it told me everything. It clinked heavily. It wasn't empty. Next to it was a stack of crumpled receipts. I flattened them out on the bedspread. They were from a cheap pawn shop 3 towns over. He had pawned my watch. He had pawned the drill. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. This wasn't just a kid experimenting. This was a severe, desperate addiction. I put everything back exactly as I found it. My chest felt tight, like a heavy stone was sitting on my lungs. That night, the tension in the dining room was suffocating. I stared at Leo across the table, watching him push a piece of chicken around his plate. "Where do you go after school, Leo?" I asked. My voice was flat, deadly calm. Sarah looked up, surprised by my tone. "Library," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "Studying." I let out a harsh, bitter breath. I knew it was a lie. I wanted to drag him upstairs and smash that lockbox open in front of his mother. But before I could say another word, his phone vibrated against the wood of the table. He snatched it up instantly. His face went entirely pale. He stood up so fast his chair scraped violently against the floorboards. "I have to go to the bathroom," he choked out, practically running from the room. Sarah looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Please don't push him," she whispered. I didn't listen. I couldn't let this poison destroy the life I had built for us. I decided I was going to follow him. I was going to catch him in the act, drag him home, and force him into rehab. The breaking point came 2 nights later. It was nearing midnight. I was sitting in the dark living room, staring out the front window. The rain was coming down in heavy sheets, blurring the streetlights. I heard the back door unlatch. The click echoed like a gunshot in the silent house. I stood up, my pulse pounding in my ears. I moved silently through the kitchen and stepped into the shadowy mudroom. Leo was standing there, soaked to the bone. He was struggling to take off his muddy sneakers. His heavy backpack was slung over one shoulder. I flipped the harsh overhead light on. He gasped, stumbling backward against the door. His eyes were wide, terrified. "Empty the bag," I ordered. My voice left no room for argument. He shook his head, clutching the straps with white-knuckled fingers. "Please," he whispered. His voice cracked. I stepped closer, towering over him. I said, "Empty it. Now." He squeezed his eyes shut. A single tear cut through the rain on his cheek. He unzipped the bag and let it drop to the linoleum floor. The contents spilled out around my feet. I braced myself for the worst. I expected baggies of pills. I expected stolen electronics. Instead, I stared down at a scattered pile of cheap canned soup, a box of generic bandages, and a crumpled, past-due electric bill. I bent down, my hands trembling, and picked up the bill. It wasn't in our name. It was addressed to a rundown apartment complex across the city. The name on the paper was Mark, his biological father. The air vanished from the room. The anger that had been fueling me for weeks evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hollow shame. I looked at my stepson. He wasn't a delinquent. He was a terrified kid buckling under a weight he was never meant to carry. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He broke down. His knees gave out, and he slid down the doorframe, burying his face in his hands. The sobs tore out of him, violent and ugly. "He's sick," Leo cried. "He got fired again." He has nothing to eat. They're going to kick him out. The pieces slammed together with sickening clarity. The missing cash. The pawned items. The exhaustion. Leo hadn't been sneaking out to party or buy drugs. He had been riding his bike miles in the pouring rain to feed the man who had abandoned him. He was stripping his own life bare to keep his father from freezing on the streets. "Why didn't you tell us?" I asked, dropping to my knees on the cold floor beside him. "Because Mom is finally happy," he choked out, looking up at me with bloodshot, desperate eyes. "If she knew he was back, it would ruin everything. I had to fix it. I had to protect her." My heart shattered. I had spent months treating him like an enemy, hunting for flaws, building a case against him in my head. I thought I was the protector of this family. I thought my money and my house made me the shield. But it was this 16-year-old boy sacrificing his sleep, his grades, and his innocence to absorb the shockwaves of a broken man. I reached out and pulled him into my chest. He fought it for a second, then collapsed against me, his wet clothes soaking through my shirt. I held him tightly while he cried out months of silent, solitary terror. "I'm so sorry," I kept whispering into his damp hair. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it." We sat there on the floor for a long time, just a man and a boy, surrounded by cans of soup in the middle of the night. Eventually, I heard soft footsteps at the top of the stairs. Sarah. The secret was out. The fallout was just beginning. The next few weeks were the hardest our family ever faced. Telling Sarah the truth broke her heart, just like Leo feared. But it didn't break her spirit. We stepped in. We handled Mark. We got him into a county treatment facility and took over the lease negotiations. We built a firm, unbreakable wall between his chaos and Leo's childhood. I bought my watch back from the pawn shop. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted to erase the trace of what Leo felt he had to do. Things are better now. The dark circles under Leo's eyes have faded. He eats dinner with us. He looks me in the eye. But our relationship is forever changed. The easy, superficial peace we used to have is gone. It's been replaced by something heavier. Something REAI still feel the sting of guilt every time I look at the front door. The shame of knowing how quickly I assumed the worst about a boy who was drowning right in front of me. I learned that a quiet house doesn't always mean a safe house. Sometimes silence isn't peace. Sometimes silence is just the sound of someone suffering in secret, terrified that asking for help will destroy the people they love. I used to pride myself on being the man who fixed this family. But I'll never forget the night I realized my teenage stepson was already doing it for me.